Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, March 5th, 2014. And tonight we have a large crowd, mostly made up of Dover's Warrant Committee. Thank you for coming this evening. We have a couple of agenda items. And the first is our representative from Minuteman, Ford Spalding, and the Assistant Superintendent, Kevin Mahoney, of the Minuteman Vocational School, Regional Vocational School. And what they've come in tonight is to talk about a possible amendment to the agreement, the long-standing agreement of the 16 district members. So with that, Ford, I will give it to you as Dover's representative, Minuteman, then Mr. Mahoney perhaps.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you all for coming. I always like to take opportunities like this, as some of you know, to talk a little bit about Minuteman, so you all know. Because I've served on the warrant committee, like you all did, in the Board of Selectmen. And one time when I got a phone call that asked if I would like to serve on the Minuteman School Committee representing Dover, I really knew nothing about Minuteman, not a thing. So I've spent 9 years or more in these capacities and didn't know a thing about Minuteman. So just briefly, we are a regional, vocational, but I call it a career and technical high school. We teach the same academic courses pretty much that are taught at Dover, Sherman, or any other high school around. But included in that, we also teach career and technical subjects. So a student, when they graduate, meet the same requirements that any student does from any high school, passing the MCAS exams and all that. And all of our students, even though I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, roughly 60 to 70% of our kids are on IEPs, 100% pass the MCAS exams.
Right.
Which I think is an amazing statistic. 60% of our kids, a little over 60% of our kids go on to colleges. The rest go on to various careers. The career programs that we have range from cosmetology to biotechnology to robotics, onto some amazing courses. And some of the things that I have learned over the years is just recently I met a young lady who I helped get a co-op job. This young lady is from, I think it's Arlington. She I found out she was interested in Alzheimer's research. And I found that out because she told the governor when we were there, when the governor was there, and I was with him in the biotechnology program, and I said I wanted to meet with her. Well, she is now working in Wellesley at the Cure Alzheimer's Fund. I got an email from her today. She keeps in pretty close contact with me. She is loving it. She's reading and doing a lot of research, and this is a dream come true for her. And her number one choice is Stanford. So this is a girl who's going to a career and technical school, and that's the kind of career she goes on. Another student who I met 4 years ago, his mother and father are from Weston. I said, why is your son going here? Because I knew what their careers were. He was very interested in going into being a cook in culinary arts. So I said to him, what is your interest? He said, I want to graduate from Minuteman. I want to go to the Culinary Institute of New York. Then I intend to go to Harvard, get my master's degree, and open up restaurants. He has been admitted to the Culinary Institute of New York, so he's on his way. Those are just a few. We had 3 cosmetology students that graduated that have their own businesses in Boston, very successful businesses. If I can, we have 2 people here tonight that I want to introduce. Rick Hennessy, who is in back of you. Rick, just for a second, your son graduated last year from Minuteman, and he's at Mass Bay.
That's
quickly your experiences.
Yeah, well, you know, and ironically, we moved here into Dover 10 years ago, specifically for the school system. I am local. I grew up next door in Medfield. My wife grew up in Walpole. We had been living out in Millis for several years. My oldest son, John, had been diagnosed with ADHD when he was in 2nd grade. He had a terrible, terrible time with the teachers, the school system, the administrators, and it unfortunately spilled over into a social life while we were out there. And it just became such a frustrating experience that we needed to make a big change. And Dover seemed like an obvious choice for us. And I've always loved this town growing up next door, and I had friends here when I was going to Severian. Moved into Dover, and we put him, he started in, I think it was 6th grade when we moved here. And he did okay. We had an IEP plan that transferred over, and he did okay. And quite frankly, the Dover school system was very, very welcoming. I got a call from the vice principal when she heard that we were moving into town and invited us in for a meeting, and so they were very welcoming. And they did their best working with John and his some of his issues. So I would consider it a mild to moderate form of ADHD. But he still struggled a lot. He still struggled a lot, and I think he felt a little bit out of place. We made a decision to homeschool him for junior high. So we worked with the superintendent here in Dover, and my wife did a tremendous job. She's a very intelligent gal and did a tremendous job of homeschooling him in 7th and 8th grade. So we started putting a lot of research, a lot of work into figuring out what we were going to do for high school. We didn't want to homeschool him. We wanted to integrate him back into, some place where he could be with kids his age. And we went to all of the private schools in the area. We did an awful lot of research and ended up talking with Minuteman. And so we finally made a decision to go with Minuteman for a whole host of reasons that I will never regret. You mentioned IEPs. The thing about Minuteman is they just get it. They get students like my son. Because I think of the percentage of people, of students that they've had up there, they just understand. They understand. And I've gone to every parent-teacher conference and open house over the 4 years that my son was there, and I never met anybody that I didn't feel was fully dedicated to what they were doing at that school. It was impressive, in my opinion. And I think that there's this is the thing, sometimes I think Minuteman is overshadowed by one of the best school systems in the state with great rankings and scores and reputation. And I think the biggest problem Minuteman has sometimes is the fact that it's a little bit of a secret. We felt we stumbled upon this secret. And, his average class size was small. He had a lot of support. The teachers worked really well with him. Guidance was fantastic. We met and, made minor changes to his IEP every year. They didn't fight with us. The middle school system was doing everything they could to fight in terms of offering any help, and there was kids falling through the cracks there. I'm not seeing that at Minuteman. I think there was just a more eclectic crowd where he was able to find a group of kids that he related with. And I think because he had some struggles relating to his ADHD, what was nice about it is you pick a program, you get to sample all the programs there, which is part of the process, before you make a choice. They want you to go through and learn them all before you make your choice. And then you carry with these students for your entire 4 years. And so for students that have had any social challenges, it gave you an opportunity to really get to know these people with some camaraderie. And I think it helped him in particular. It really did.
So he graduated and
He
he's off to college
graduated,
now?
he's over at Mass Bay now, he's doing well, and I think we accomplished something with Minuteman that I am not sure we could have accomplished with other schools. I don't know how else to put it.
Tom Hurry, you probably had the same experience, and your son's a junior and interested in welding.
Right, yeah. So curiously similar fact pattern. Diagnosed with ADHD, struggled through middle school, did well with teachers that understood how to work with someone like that, and did extremely poorly with teachers that didn't. So it was this gigantic roller coaster, and went to the Minuteman Shadow Day and couldn't believe he found the place that he wanted to go. So it was just the perfect setting for him. Since he's been a little kid, wanted to break stuff and put it back together. And he's very good at breaking things, working on putting it back together. But he needs that kind of hands-on learning. And it's as wonderful as Dover Sherburne school districts are. They struggle with those types of learners, kids that need to take things in their hands and touch them and put them together and can't sit down and learn the academics in the same way. Not that they can't, but they don't have the intelligence, they just don't learn that way. So the focus at Minuteman of the academics plus the doing things, making things is just perfect setting.
Thank you. I thought that would be helpful, just so you could hear about experiences that some of our people have had. Let's turn to the regional agreement. We've spent 6-7 years working on our regional agreement to try to find the right mix. Carol Lisbon served on one of the committees, if not maybe the first committee, that worked on an agreement which we came up with, and then that was probably thrown in the wastebasket pretty quickly. So Carol spent a lot of time up at Minuteman and been through that. Part of the reason why we've looked at changing the regional agreement is we have a building project coming up, which is some people, like a town like Arlington, which sends a lot of kids there, is very concerned about the cost of that and the effect. And we want to be able to figure out how we can attract other communities. 40% of our students come from out-of-district towns. We have 16 in-district, 40% come from out-of-district towns, and that's Waltham, Woburn, Boston, Cambridge, and send kids to Minuteman. I think it's how many total?
Total of 32 towns.
32 towns outside of our district send kids to Minuteman. So we wanted to see if we could come up with a regional agreement that is fair. Well, no regional agreement is perfect, but we think this one is a good one, and I strongly recommend it for the town of Dover, and for maybe a surprising reason. But why don't we go through the change of the agreement, answer some questions. Carol and Jim were nice enough to send some questions to us. We have answers for those, and then go with that.
Thank you, Ford, and thank you for inviting us here this evening. I'd also like to thank the parents for coming in and speaking on the experiences their students are having. As we go through the district this time of year, we're meeting with all of the boards of selectmen and finance committees. We are finding that we are receiving positive experience or feedback about their level of satisfaction at Minuteman, which is very gratifying to us. But what we continue to hear, as Ford indicated, is the issue of governance and costs that we have to try and address. So back in 14 months ago, the Commonwealth authorized a grant of $50,000, a sustainability grant, to allow the district technical support to pull together what they thought might be an amended regional agreement that would enhance the sustainability of the district moving forward over the next 40 or 50 years. As Ford indicated, we have a high percentage of our students that come from out of district, and the out of district tuition rate is set by the Commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have no control over that. And what we're seeing is that the Commissioner's intent to lower that rate due to pressure that he may perhaps be getting from superintendents that are sending some of these out-of-district students. So the model is kind of working against us relative to the revenue side, because if we're taking so many students in and they're lowering the per-student cost, it ultimately will shift that burden onto the in-district communities. We've been very active in voicing our displeasure with the Commissioner and still working along those ends. And it talks to an intergovernmental agreement that we've been working on that's running a parallel track with the regional agreement. But I'll touch on that in a minute. So as we move forward, There's a subcommittee that looked at this matter of selectmen, finance committee members, and some of our school committee members, warrant committee members, that worked over the last 12 months and bring forward this recommendation, trying to hit the key things that they thought were critical. And although, as Ford mentioned, it's not perfect. It does some things for some communities that work to their benefit, to others to their disadvantage. It doesn't serve everybody's needs, and that's the challenge when you have a district of this demographic and size. We have some towns that send a significant number of kids, and we have a group of towns, such as yourself, that send very low numbers of students, so it's very hard to accommodate. But I'd like you to keep that in mind as we walk through, and I did distribute a PowerPoint that I can walk through. But the first slide talks about some of the changes that we focused on here in the regional agreement. There's a change in how we would be assessing the annual costs. There's a change in how capital costs would also be assessed. We're looking at a weighted vote at the school committee level for most of the routine business. We've changed the method for the admission of new member communities to try and make it more attractive, to solicit some of these out-of-district communities to join the district. And it may make some sense for some communities to consider withdrawing and go on a tuition basis. Right now, that's a very difficult task. We're looking to we've identified income that needs to be a contribution to capital costs. That relates to the intergovernmental agreement that I'll talk about in a bit, and authorization by member communities for new debt, as well as amendments to future regional agreements. When we look at the assessment of operating costs right now, it's based on the most recent year's enrollment. What we're looking to do is, under this proposed agreement, is to change it to a 4-year rolling average. On capital costs, it's based on, again, most recent year's enrollment with a minimum of 5, which works to the disadvantage of Dover. We're looking at a 3-factor proposed assessment where each community pays 1% cost of membership, if you will. Then there's a component of 34%, since 1% of our 16 members represents that 16%. The 34% component represents a combined effort factor, which is established under Chapter 70 by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is intended to be a wealth measurement to be applied to the distribution of debt and capital. And then the remaining 50% is based on enrollment, 4-year rolling average with a minimum of 5. As far as school committee votes, currently right now, each community has 1 equal vote. Under the proposal, we're looking at a weighted voting system based on the 4-year rolling average, except when it comes to incurring debt. Incurring debt would specifically require a 2/3 vote of all committee members, regardless of weighted vote or actual members that are in attendance at the meeting that evening. The admission to new members, again, trying to make it an incentive for new members to join the district. Upon joining the district, currently they would be responsible for 100% of the capital cost. Under the proposed amendment, it would allow the school committee to negotiate a gradual buy-in over a 4-year period, so that by the 4th year they'd be fully assessed, subject to approval of all members. We've also included some cleanup language recognizing cities as possible new members. Withdrawal of member communities has also been an issue that we've heard both from our in-district members as well as potential out-of-district members. We've heard, particularly on the out-of-district folks, some of the reaction is, why would we consider coming into a school district where there's really no exit opportunity? So what we're trying to do with this amendment is As you perhaps know right now, in order for a community to withdraw, they would need an affirmative vote to approve withdrawal from the remaining 15 communities. A very, very high bar, very unlikely. Under this proposed agreement, it would just require either a vote to approve or no action, or to not disapprove from a majority of the communities rather than all of them. So that gives it a lower threshold by which to meet. It would also discusses a mechanism for which, if debt is incurred, there's a specific timeline that allows the community to withdraw even after the debt's been authorized. I'll talk to that in a little bit more in a minute.
Can I go back a little bit to the withdrawal also?
Yes.
Doesn't it require a two-thirds vote of the town meeting of the town that wishes to withdraw?
That's correct.
And then you need to get approval to withdraw from the Department of Education, because the Department of Education wants to make sure that there is a place for your students if they want to go under Chapter 74 to a career and technical school. So you have to receive approval from the Department of Education. And it's a 3-year waiting period before you get out.
That's correct.
So you elect to get out in 2015, you have to wait 3 years before you are fully out.
I don't want to ask questions to interrupt, but specific to that Department of Education, was that in the current agreement also?
No.
So,
But it is, but it's not in the agreement, but it still has
It's
to be
required.
approved.
It's
required.
required.
It's required.
Okay, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, but it's required by the Department of Education.
Okay.
And we don't know what kind of hurdle that is. But we think we have a solution.
Ah, okay.
I mentioned the application of district income identified as contribution to capital costs. What we're talking about there is the intergovernmental agreement, where currently right now we're only able to charge the tuition rate that's set by the commissioner. We've been working very closely with the commissioner's office and trying to work on a formula or a methodology that will allow the district to charge a facility fee that will offset some of the debt and capital costs that are associated.
So the only thing we can charge right now is operating costs to out-of-district students. What we're working with the Commissioner of Education on is also being able to charge a capital fee. Capital fee would apply to a new building.
Yes.
And we think we're receiving some positive vibes on that.
Okay.
The next item that discusses the authorization for new debt. Currently, right now, the school district has the opportunity to avail itself to 2 options under the statute. Chapter 71, Section 16D and 16N. 16D is the more traditional approach that we've used in the past, or that most regional schools use in the past, where they receive the authorization by the school committee, and then that request to incur debt is heard before all of our town meetings, and it requires a unanimous approval in order to issue the debt. The other approach is that the school committee could vote to incur debt looking at the 16N option. The 16N option would require the entire district hold an election on the same day, and the aggregate vote would then determine whether or not the debt would be incurred or not. So when we looked at these 2 options, we tried...
Is that one vote per member, or?
Per person.
So
It would be a majority vote of the
Basically,
entire
a
district.
super town meeting. as we've talked about.
It's sort of like a super town meeting,
Right.
except it's a super town vote.
It's an election, 51%.
Super town meeting with 16 communities instead of 2 when we were talking about the region.
But it's not a town meeting, it's a actual
It's-
ballot
but it's a
vote
vote.
by the citizens.
Yes, but
Yeah.
Right.
And it's been used recently.
And so 2/3 of each town's citizens need to approve.
No, majority, right?
Simple majority, that's correct.
That'd be a lot of fun.
So some of the, so what we're trying to do under the proposed agreement is, this would require the school committee to go forward with the unanimous approval at town meeting. And failing that, the school committee may choose to go with the district-wide election. The way the district-wide election option works in the agreement is that if the election is held and the majority of the voters approve the debt, the community may exercise a withdrawal provision if that particular community voted against the debt. And then they then have 60 days to call a town meeting and then by 2/3 vote elect to withdraw. And then by submitting their petition to withdraw, that enacts the withdrawal provisions we talked about earlier, where they would only need the remaining, the majority members to vote to allow them to withdraw. And by going through that process, they would not be obligated for the debt that was incurred under the general election. They'd be obligated for any debt prior to that, but they would not be obligated for any debt incurred under that election. And if in the event they're unsuccessful in leaving the district because town meetings voted to not approve their withdrawal, they would not be obligated for that debt if they remain in the district.
What about the 3-year period?
That would take effect. They just wouldn't be assessed their portion of the
So
debt.
the 3-year waiting period would only apply to the operating costs?
Right, that would be
Or any debt that wasn't.
Any debt that wasn't- yes. yes.
And the 16D and N is not a creation of this, it's a creation of existing
Right.
law.
Right, no, I know that.
And that pathway is really the only pathway. I mean, once you change the agreement so that Dover does not have 1/16 of the vote, we basically have no vote and no say because our numbers are so low. So we're basically disenfranchised for all intents and purposes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, and then just the final slide was just if there are any amendments to future regional agreements, it would be required a three-fourths vote by all members of the school committee, and then it would require a unanimous approval from the district.
That's the regional agreement.
Right.
Why don't we answer questions on that before
Great.
I add any more,
Good.
anything else that's
Well,
complicated?
first of all, thank you. Boy, thank you, Mr. Mahoney. My first thought is you had the 2 best advertisements I've ever heard for the school speak this evening. Thank you for those statements, gentlemen. I'm glad you talked about, we're going to talk about the agreement, because there's no way we want to get in the way of a family or a student wanting this type of education. Does a great job, we went to the campus. All we're here is to talk about the agreement to ascertain whether it's feasibly responsible for the town of Dover to remain in this agreement. And what has brought this to the forefront for us is the campus construction project in the near future, and what that means to the town of Dover. And I haven't seen any hard numbers. I know I advanced a question to you, Ford, this morning. Hopefully you can answer that in a few minutes. But that's what's really going to drive our decision and whether to stay as an active member or to go out of district, so to speak. And at the same time, encouraging the families. And Dover, obviously, I imagine, would pick up tuition, out-of-district tuition and so forth, but that's a whole different conversation.
We can talk about-
We would
we'll talk a
never,
little bit
ever
about that.
discourage anyone from using this type of education, that's for sure. That's not our intent, and it's not part of the
And
discussion.
by law, you have to be able to offer it anyway. And that's why you have to go to the Commissioner of Education under Chapter 74. You need to have an outlet.
Okay.
Well, I think this board, over the 5, 6, 7 years that we've been working on this, I think it can be said that every single selectman over those years, and we've had 5 or 6 different ones, okay, has repeatedly said that, shown support for the school. And I actually love the fact that that you were using a different term for it, not Minuteman VOTEC, because to me, Minuteman Vocational is as bad as saying that I'm a member of the Council on Aging. There's got to be a different word to use. And vocational just doesn't apply anymore to 21st century education. So I'd love to see the name of the school changed everywhere.
Well, it's career technical school, and if everything, as I told you last night, Carol, and I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag if I get kicked to my left, I did, but PBS is going to be spending 4 days on campus to do, so not on Minuteman, it's on career technical schools, and they're using Minuteman as an example. So I hear career technical schools being applauded at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, but sometimes I wonder if it's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. I agree with you, the selectmen in Dover have always been very supportive, as have anybody that I've ever talked to about Minuteman. I think, as I heard earlier, it's a pretty well-kept secret, and that's as much our fault as anyone else's fault, but it's a great program. But let's talk about the agreement, and I think there are avenues, and I think Kevin's going to answer your question directly, Jim, but there are avenues that we can also consider as we consider this agreement, which I think we should support.
So I have a question. So in some of the discussions I've had, my understanding was that certain towns within the district have already expressed their desire to pull out of the region.
Not formally, but there has been whispering.
So the question is, how would that work with the impending adoption of this new regional agreement? It seems to me, if I understand the agreement that's currently in place, it's next to impossible to withdraw from the district. So, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
You vote for the agreement.
But then you have a 3-year.
Well, you're going to have a 3-year no matter what you do. So you vote for the agreement, and then if the town of Dover decided they wanted to leave, they can do so, and they don't need the unanimous support of all the other towns.
No, but you need support.
You need support, and we have such a small vote
Yeah.
under the new agreement.
Well,
But you have me there, so you'll be right.
Well, you need 7 other towns.
Why don't you first answer Jim's question, because I think you're...
As to the projected cost of the campus?
We do not have a cost at this point. We are working with the MSBA. I'm chairing the building committee. We're working with the MSBA on a program. We have decided that we are going to basically build a building for 800 students. And that's what we're looking at. It's either going to be renovated, brand new, or renovated and new. That has been a recent decision. MSBA said we want you to come up with not just 435, which would basically be for in-district, but we want you to do it for 800, because you're at 800 now. We're just shy of 800 students. So that decision has been made that we're moving in that direction. You have guesstimated costs?
As to the cost considerations, we're looking at a project anywhere from about 122 million to 130 million. We're looking at, we're looking at repairs. We're looking at renovation, addition. We're looking at perhaps a new building on the other side of the campus, in the Lincoln side of the campus, and repurposing the existing building or go through an appropriate, responsible transition out of there and reusing that space. When we did some of our preliminary models, when we look at the capital assessment formula, the three-step capital assessment formula that I mentioned earlier, that doesn't bode to the benefit of the community that sends a small number of students, frankly. But just by virtue of having to pay 1% alone is almost equivalent to what you're doing now, as it is. So when you factor in the wealth factor as well as the enrollment, it essentially doubles what your debt would be. When we looked at some estimates, we were looking at estimates of about, based on $120 million with 40% reimbursement from MSBA, the annual debt service to Dover would be somewhere in the area of $50,000. We'd be looking at $100,000 over a 30-year bond if you were to participate in this project. So candidly, from the cost perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense. When we're looking at the intergovernmental agreement, and again, I wish we could offer more specifics, but we're hoping very, very soon that the Commission will offer us the calculations and guidelines, and we want to share those with folks, even if we can get them before town meeting. But the expectation would be that in addition to the tuition rate that I was talking about, which is close to about $18,300 per student right now.
And that's only for the education costs. It doesn't include transportation costs or special education costs, which are all added on top of that, which brings it closer to...
It's about 22, and then whatever the transportation would be. But we're looking to see if a facilities fee could be added on there, which will bring it more closely aligned with what in-district communities are paying per student. So I think that when we look at that, we're hearing from some of the smaller communities that are looking at the tuition. The tuition is an option because they want to continue to provide the availability of Minuteman to their students. As we look at it over time, we need to amend our admissions policy so that preference would be given to in-district students in terms of program selection. So as we look at the size of the school, and we're looking at an 800-student school now, and that those we're going to continue to look at those enrollment and studies. That would be the highest enrollment number that we'd be looking at now. It was the approach of the school building committee and our design team that it would be better off spending our feasibility money looking at the 800 model, and we can then scale it down rather than looking at two different enrollment numbers. So I think that over time, if as we move forward with the project, if we're able to attract new members by virtue of this amended agreement, increase the membership, and with a new building, it tends to follow that more students will tend to go to that school. That over time, we hope to grow the enrollment so that we do have, a 700 or 800 student in-district population. And then at that time, it may limit access to students, but that would be a progression we would see over time.
The other factor going into the cost of the building is we have been grandfathered into a 40% rate from MSBA. If Dover Sherburne went out to do a new building now, it would be close to 31%. But we got the grant, we convinced them to grandfather us because of the timing factor that when we made our original application. Included in this is, I think we are working with the legislature and through Senator Donnelly to try to get a reimbursement rate of additional 20% for regional career and technical schools, 10% for regional schools, which affects Dover Sherburne. So if we could get up to a 70% rate, which we probably could if that happened, that would have a huge effect in addition to what Kevin was talking about. But all that's work in progress. We have a meeting at the end of this month up at the State House. I have written and talked to the governor. It's just a slow process.
We're also having a breakfast on Friday morning for municipal officials. I believe we've extended that invitation at 8:30 at the school if they're able to make it. It should be pointed out that in order for this amended regional agreement to be adopted, it does require unanimous approval of all 16 communities. So there are some communities that are looking at it for approving it for an exit strategy opportunity, which is fair. We understand those considerations. But we think overall it's a better agreement than we currently have now. If we look at at a scenario where the district does move forward next month with a district-wide election and 51% of the voters support the project, then all the communities that are currently district members are obligated to support that debt. Under this agreement, there's a process where the school district would need approval from town meetings, and if failing support there, the school committee may go to the district-wide election, and then if that is supported, it still gives the community the opportunity to a pathway out of the district without the obligation of having to burden that debt.
You know, it's interesting in my mind. I was just thinking about the leverage we have as a member right now is to not burden the taxpayers of Dover with any type of building, a campus construction. Versus if we were to go along and amend the agreement, we lose that leverage tremendously. Now, we could try to get out, and possibly, quite honestly, we talk about exit strategies from this, so I understand that. And we talk about that, and that would be a consideration. But that's not foolproof to get out of the new agreement, or the amended agreement either. So we'll lose a lot of leverage, so we have to weigh if we want to lose that leverage we have right now.
The other thing I may want to mention, because we do have a number of different initiatives going parallel tracks as we have this initiative, we have the intergovernmental agreement, which, by the way, is not included in this. This is something that we're working with Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, along with the building project. Mass School Building Authority has been very, very cooperative, and I'm sure Ford could speak this at length, given that he's chair of the building committee. He's been very cooperative working with us on the timeline for this project. The statement of interest for this project was submitted in November of 2008, and they want to see the district, they're very much concerned about the sustainability of the district as well, being partners in this investment. And so they've been very, very accommodating in extending their typical, very prescriptive deadline for meeting feasibility study. Our feasibility study is supposed to be done in June, and we're not even a third of the way done, because we've been keeping them informed on this process. And they're very, I think they've been watching this carefully to see if we're able to get our governance improved in order for us to be able to move forward with the project. So I think that's another component that we've been trying to keep our eye on, is to try and move forward with the regional agreement so it doesn't cause concern with MSBA that we may not be able to perform on getting this project done.
Well, you know,
You're not going to see a building project on the Dover warrant until the spring of 2016.
Well, I would hope that we don't see a building project of the Dover warrant at all. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, when we did some numbers in one of the study committees up in Lexington, okay, and I just couldn't find the numbers, those minutes in my files. But I had calculated, based upon the historical participation that we have of Dover students, okay, that if we, and using the numbers at the time for the out-of-district tuition and the in tuition, that it was a payback period of over 50 years. So there's no way with the numbers of students that we attend, and we can talk about they should be higher numbers, but they're not higher numbers. So if we assume that the past is about what the future is going to be, and we're talking 1, 2, 3 students a year, then the numbers just don't work to be part of any agreement. They just don't, with the capital expenditures that you have. It's better for us to pay, if you have an IGA, to pay the out-of-district with the facilities charge. It will still be less expensive for the citizens of Dover over decades than to be part of any regional agreement and pay that share.
So what you do is you vote for the agreement change, so it allows you to get out. You have a better pathway to get out.
A better pathway, but not a foolproof pathway.
Nothing's foolproof in this world, but
Well,
especially when you're dealing with
We have to
government.
weigh these options.
But you have a much better opportunity if your objection is to get out. What you do is you vote to approve this agreement. You then go through the process of getting out. You then enter into an interlocal agreement with Minuteman. And you do that before you go to the Department of Education. This is a new deal now. You develop, and that agreement says that Minuteman will reserve up to 5 spaces for Dover students. So you are not in the district. You are not bound to pay the capital costs currently. And you have reserved spaces, because we would do that for Dover, potentially, for students. So that allows your students to come here and not pay the capital costs.
Can I make
And that is another aspect that we're working on, which is not part of the agreement. But we believe it's going to be acceptable by the Department of Education.
Do you know the timing?
Because there's a 74B, you have to provide career and technical education to your kids. This is going to be an avenue because the other schools may be filled.
But if one of our students, and I think we have one at Norfolk Aggie this year, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be Minuteman. Once
This
we're out of
agreement
the,
would
once
be
we're out of the,
Minuteman.
once we're out of the Minuteman agreement, though, it actually gives more flexibility as
Not
to where our students.
necessarily if the schools are filled.
Oh, if they're filled, well.
So if they're filled, then and most of the career and technical schools are filled. Norfolk Aggie's different because specifically it's an Aggie school.
So was there any discussion about, because, to your point of the chicken and the egg, and we're hearing an awful lot of trust us as we proceed, and I understand why, goodness knows.
Like Obama's healthcare,
Right,
trust us.
yeah.
We change it all the time. Like today.
But, let's not get into that. Looking at a couple of the other communities, you can sort of just look at the numbers and know a couple of other communities right off the bat. There are 3 or 4 others, including Dover, that are probably having the exact same issues we have, and probably have done the same envelope calculator stuff to go, wait a minute, it pays for us to get out of this. Has there been any discussion about getting some type of commitment from the 16 communities ahead of time as to how they will vote to allow towns to get out after the new agreement is done?
I think not formally, but that discussion may come up Friday morning. I know that there has been concern from Lincoln about the same thing. We met with them last night. They're on the fence right now, but they seem to be leaning towards staying in the district. But they're curious to see where other communities are and how they're intending to approach it. We have also received some feedback from Weston that is considering perhaps exiting the district for the similar reasons that we just stated. So it might be a better alternative to go with the tuition, the facility fee, and guaranteed slots in the intergovernmental agreement.
They like that a lot.
Yeah, we seem to be.
But that's not in place yet. That's another, just trust us and that's it.
Well, that's a good point. And we're going to town meeting in May with this particular warrant article. What's the timing of the Department of Education saying that's a good method to do it?
We've been working with them just about daily. because we really would like to have it Friday for the municipal breakfast. But our attorneys have been working with them. I know that they're also working with MSBA because there may be a portion of the facility fee calculation that takes into consideration that community's percentage participation in an MSBA project. So that would be sort of a fairer allocation based upon what it would be if they were in the district or if they were approved for an MSBA project. So it's a little bit complicated, but we've been in constant contact trying to get this done because we want to get this information out before town meeting.
When is the first town meeting of the member town?
March 29th in Lincoln, Saturday.
Can I make a comment? I just,
Yes, sir.
just related to some of this, some general, some specific. And I understand why this discussion is going on, although I know I'm a little concerned because I'm hearing a lot of this discussion seems to be focusing on how do we possibly get out as some sort of a district participant. And the reason why I moved to Dover is because of the resources, the school system, along with being somebody that runs a business, I also invest in real estate. And the places I invest in real estate are towns that have good school systems, good resources, good libraries, things of this nature. And I think that's all part of what's important to Dover too. What I think is unique about Dover, and maybe some of these towns that I'm not sure they've looked at this from all the angles, is Minuteman doesn't necessarily duplicate what's going on here in Dover. It's not a duplication issue, like when a larger company buys a smaller company. I know firsthand that this school complements the types of services that you can get living here in Dover, and that my son was able to be picked up on the end of my street every morning and brought in a school bus up to Lexington, and we thought this was just fantastic.
I don't want to cut you short there,
Okay.
and I appreciate what you're saying,
Yeah.
and which is the intrinsic value of having this. And one of the questions I posed was, when you decided as a family, or
Yeah.
whatever families were involved, when you choose Minuteman, Dover being a district member, was that a factor?
No, it wasn't originally,
So,
but
that-
part of my point is...
That being said, we're looking at this from a financial standpoint. We are not educators, and there's no way that I would want to negatively affect our decision if it affected a family's decision not to use Minuteman.
Right.
So I hear you, and that will weigh into the decision.
And just to finish my point too, is I think part of the issue here is the participation, the number of students that are going there. And you were talking about the historic data behind that. And I think, you know, and I use the word secret, and I don't know what sort of a collaboration is going on between the Dover school system and Minuteman, but I know, having raised a son with ADHD and having met some of his friends and some of the other students that I've met along the way, that there's other kids, no doubt, currently in Dover that would benefit from some of the services and things that are offered at Minuteman, but maybe the parents are simply not aware of it. And maybe the guidance department and some of the others in the school system aren't aware that there's things that they would be able to offer. And if that communication and that collaboration was there, it could potentially raise the participation rate of students, and then it starts to spread out your cost. And looking at this as a businessman, you know, how I spread my cost out, the efficacy of the dollar. And if we were able to offer that, and that was there for our residents, that we could take on more voting power, as well as having more services that are going to complement what's being offered here in Dover. That's all.
I hear your comments, and they're good comments. Certainly, that's not our charge to market Minuteman
Right, I
and
understand.
things of that nature.
So I just wanted, your question was specifically around, was the decision to Minuteman because we were a district or not?
Yes.
Is that a consideration? And he answered no, and it was only no because it was essentially guaranteed a spot there. So you have to consider, it wasn't a consideration just because it didn't have to be a consideration.
But if we're perhaps going to be guaranteed 5, then that'll weigh into the decision also. But I hear that. Thank you for that.
I think there's a chance for a win-win from Dover's point of view. And to me, the win-win is if Dover decide to leave, we can work out an agreement with Dover that there would be spots available for Dover students. It may cost more per student, not counting a building project, but it may cost more, but it still may be worthwhile. That could be a great opportunity. Because I'm not sure, in my wildest imagination, that we're going to have more than 5 kids there, but we could also make it a 10-year, for 10 students. The number is pretty much arbitrary until the school's full. But I think I would feel strongly that we always have a door open that we can send our kids to Minuteman. And my guess is you 3 would feel the same way, if we could work that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So Ford, we've sort of all 3 of us are sort of numbers folks. And we had asked, I had asked in an email this morning, I think, Jim, you had the same conversation a couple of weeks ago. Can you develop any numbers, given whatever assumptions you'd like to use, that could show us what the future might look like as far as per student cost with various assumptions on facilities and out of district and,
It's a good question. We've been asked that by a number of our communities, but until such time as we're able to see the formula that the Department of Education will allow us to calculate, we can't right now. But it's our intention to provide that information once it's known.
The cost for out-of-district students was, by the Department of Education, was going up. All of a sudden, when we have a different head of the Department of Education, it's now going down because of pressures that were put upon him, primarily from the cities. So that's, are there guarantees in government? There aren't, as we all know. But we have to deal with faith a little bit. And I think you want to keep your options open. And I think your options are closed under the current agreement.
Actually, I see it a little differently.
I know.
We have a full vote and we have leverage in financial matters, and that's how I work at it. Pardon?
You have disproportionate leverage.
Not in the current agreement. We have a full
16,
vote.
we have 1/16th. If to my point before, we are disenfranchised.
Right.
Yeah, so you
In the
can
new
look at
one.
it from the other communities that we are disproportionately powerful for the amount of.
Yes, but we need to look out for Dover's interest. We're not a nonprofit looking to help out all the other cities and towns in the area.
If you're looking at it from a financial decision only, right, then you can't really hold the district hostage either with the 1/16 goal.
Thanks for that comment. Now, this is a dual meeting. It started as a dual meeting with the Warrant Committee also. So, and we are running late, but I will open the questions in the Warrant Committee if you have any right now.
Folks, comments?
Because I don't think you're appearing before the Warrant Committee other than this. Is that correct?
No, this is
Piggybacking in.
Good. So please, if you feel free. If not, you want to, any more questions, Carol? Robin?
Can we do, as long as the Finance Committee's here, quickly on the budget?
Absolutely. Well, please.
And this is for fiscal year
Fiscal
15.
Yes.
And I think we can be quick with it.
Yes, oh yeah, I can be very quick.
Because they have all the information, so I think what the bottom number is. The bottom number is based on the number of students as of October of 2013.
13.
So we've gone from 2 students to 1 student enrolled at school now. The bottom line for Dover is,
37,798.
and it was last year.
67,531.
So John, we just made you some money.
One way to look at it.
And that's under the current agreement
That's correct.
Yes.
Well, but that's the agreement that's going to be in place.
For
for
the
fiscal
next fiscal
15.
year, right.
Okay.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So does that count rising middle schoolers? I mean, is this a definite one, or?
This is, it's the number of students enrolled at Minuteman as of October 2013.
Oh, okay, I understand, thank you.
Okay.
So we had 2 students there last year, represented by the 2 dads, and we now have 1 student.
With that, thank you, Ms. Mahoney. It was a great presentation. Ford, as
You like
always.
that budget presentation?
I thought it was very good. I think we'll close this agenda item then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. If there's any information that you need from the school as a result of this, or any future questions, we will be following up on the intergovernmental agreement as that information becomes available. But we'll provide
And Friday morning at what time?
8:30.
8:30, if you'd like to have breakfast at Minuteman, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And that would be the same true of finance committee members. If they want to come, just let me know so I can verify.
And Mr. Hennessy and Mr. Hurd, thank you for coming in and making those
My
statements.
pleasure, thanks for hearing us.
Okay, we have a selectman meeting in progress. Let me move forward, please. Okay, thank you. And let's go on to the next agenda item, which is to discuss the ballot questions. And specifically, John Cohn, who's the chairman of the warrant committee, every year we ask the warrant committee if they would like to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen as to any town ballot questions. And do you anticipate any this year, John?
No, in terms of, the financial override question, which is always on people's mind. Given the numbers that we have now on the revenue side and on the expense side, some of which are estimates that are still firming up, but in combination with the Dover's free cash position, the warrant committee does not anticipate any need for an override ballot question this year, fortunately.
Great. Well, John, thank you. Thank you for staying a little longer than I anticipated for that first agenda item.
Oh, terrific. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Good night, John. Okay, on to the next agenda item, which is we will vote to revise the fiscal 2015 Selectmen's capital budget request. And specifically, we had a capital budget item in there to renovate the Carroll Community Center's restrooms. And I was a big proponent of pushing them into fiscal 15, despite pushback, which now appears to be correct, to get a better picture of the cost and the overall plan. Well, the architect came in, I believe it was about a week ago now, with a cost estimate for the 4 existing restrooms in the amount of estimated $526,000.
That's if you do the project all at once.
Yes, that's the 4 restrooms. And what was determined quickly is that's a very large amount of money not to fully vet the plans, the specifications, and perhaps the architect also, let alone dealing with council aging, park and rec, and the different licensees we have over there to see what their thoughts are. So it was decided that we will push that out to fiscal 2016. That's the idea right now. So with that in mind, I would like to vote to push the Carroll Community restrooms from the fiscal 15 capital budget request to fiscal 16 capital budget request.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
May I just say a couple of things? So, at last week's CMAC meeting, this was the agenda item, and it was a wonderful discussion. Don Mills was there to answer specific questions as well. But after talking about the nitty-gritty and how you can spend that kind of money for bathrooms, we got into the larger issue of the perception and status and designation of the Carroll Community Center. And if you look back over, so it's now probably 12 years or so, when we acquired it from the school committee, and it was in incredibly bad shape. And we went through 4 or 5 study committees, and we spent somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 on planning and this and that and everything else. And we then went back to town meeting and said we need to preserve the building at this point because we really don't know what we're going to do with it. So let's spend the $350,000 or whatever it was to seal it and fix the roof and all the pointing, and we did that. And then over time, we've been fixing up the inside cosmetically, and I think at this point, almost every room has been renovated. And we can see the usage going up, and it's actually quite a full building at this point. So to make a decision to spend $500 and some odd thousand on bathrooms sort of requires that we consciously, versus sort of just an evolution of saying, you know what, this building is here to stay for the good foreseeable future. And we've been good stewards of it over the last 10 years. Limited by our feelings of exactly how long is this building going to last. And one of the things that CMAQ suggested was that that we move this out to fiscal year 16 and really spend a year talking about the future of the building, educating the townsfolk, those that aren't there for various programs, on what the building has become and how it's being used, and really get buy-in that what we see is what we've got for quite some time to come, and that we're not going to be having another building committee that's going to, suggest raising it and starting all over and that type of thing. Because otherwise, it's hard to justify spending this kind of money for bathrooms. But if you think of it as a building that's going to be around for another 20, 30, 40 years, well, then it makes all the sense in the world. So we need to go through that kind of process as well. And CMAQ sort of took that on as that's sort of going to be their mission for the coming years, to really work on those types of issues.
Well, that's
I
very well
think-
put.
Right, I think coupled with that is to educate the town about the current use of the building, and also how much or what percentage of the operating costs are being offset by the current tenants that are in there. And I think it's also important, because I've heard a lot of numbers thrown around and some of them aren't accurate, but to also provide an accurate estimate of what the town has invested in the building, since it was given back to us, because I think some of the numbers have been inflated somewhat. And thirdly, I think it's also important for people to understand that there's another big ticket item coming down the pike, and that's at some point we will need to replace the boilers in the building. So just renovating the bathrooms isn't it. We do know that there's this other big ticket item, and I would encourage people to walk through that building. I myself was surprised by the number of small businesses that are in there, and all of them service the entire community.
The Dover Mothers Association has been given one of the rooms to do sort of like what Parent Talk is doing. So they're going to have programs in there and toys and so forth and so on for Dover's kids.
And the gym, it may be small, but it does get a lot of use just from the kids in Dover, going to play basketball, and the members of the C of A use it as well. So, I really think it has become a community center, not just in name.
It has in practice, but it's sort of unknown.
Exactly. It's
So-
one of our little secrets.
One of our little secrets.
That's the
So,
theme for the meeting tonight,
Right,
huh?
right,
go.
right.
so I think to have an educated vote requires that we spend the time appropriately to think this through and really go through how it's
dispel
used.
misinformation,
Yeah.
because, I think there
Yep.
is unfortunately a lot of, or some
Yeah.
misinformation floating.
Thank you, Robin. That's excellently put also. Okay, so we'll push it out. We voted to push it out to fiscal 16. And I guess over the next year, we have our work cut out, and CMAQ has their work cut out to educate everyone why that building is so important to the town.
I would also suggest that they reach out to the Long Range Planning Committee. This may be something that committee could help with.
Okay.
They are looking
I'll
for
share
some
that.
projects.
I know they are.
Okay, running a little late off the agenda, but next agenda item is other business. And before we get into the special license, Carol, you want to talk about our insurance budget for
Oh,
fiscal
yes.
2015?
Yes. So when we approved the various operating budgets back in December, when we got to Department 914, which is our group health insurance, which covers the actual healthcare premiums for current subscribers of Dover's health plans, but also our annual funds that we apply towards our OPEB responsibility. So that's what makes up Department 914. And we run into this every year where we've got a budget cycle that is November, December, but West Suburban Health Group, which provides the plans for Dover, doesn't really meet until February to really set the rates for the following year. And we always know that we need to relook at this, at this time of year after the meeting. So in fact, there was a meeting held in early February, which I believe Mr. Ramsey attended. And we had used in our preliminary budget that we approved in December, we had used a growth rate of 10%. And that was 10% of the fiscal year 14 budget. If you look at our fiscal year 13 actual versus our preliminary fiscal year 15 budget, it was actually a 33% increase, because we budget with flexibility in there for additional subscribers and so forth. So West Suburban has chosen to use a rate of 6%?
In essence, yes.
6% as a growth rate in premiums next year, not the 10%. So in looking at the impact of a 6% versus a 10% rate, and looking at what we expect fiscal year 14 to come in at now that we're halfway through the year, it appears that we can reduce the budget, the total budget, by $300,000 and still have about a 10% flexibility for any unexpected increases next year, which would be additional enrollees of the health plan. So I would like to recommend that we revise Department 914 accordingly. And this time next year, we'll be taking a look to see how conservative we really were.
So,
I just think it's important, we certainly realize this, but for other people to realize that as part of being part of this consortium, it's a group rate, and West Suburban sets the rates, and they actually have elected to set the rates a little lower than market. And so I believe this is a really prudent thing for us to do, because we've been driving across the towns to really look at your actuals and budget off of that, as opposed to your budget. However, it may be that actual healthcare costs go up, and we may look down the road at some higher rates. But I still believe that this is the right thing for us to do.
great. I also am in agreement. So Carol, the revised budget total would be?
So I think if we take and I don't have a calculator, so I'm going to round off. If we take the line item for purchase of services, group health insurance, which we currently have budgeted at $1,936,000. If we put that at $1,636,000.
$1,636,000.
Yep, so just take $300,000 off that. Then that brings the number down to 1,8.
I have 1,862,458.
Yeah, right.
But if the math's wrong, we'll correct
think the math is correct. Math is
So
correct.
I move that subject to the quick math to get it done, because I don't have a calculator here.
Subject to the town accountant certifying that calculation.
Or anybody with a calculator.
So Felicia, that was $1,862,458. Thank you. Carol, I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Robin, for your input also. I will second that. All in favor?
Aye. So we'll get this down to warrant committee, because that's a significant change.
Yeah,
Yep.
too bad John's not here. He'd love that.
Yeah. And speaking of capital budget, we'll get that out. I'll send Bob an email tonight, just letting him know, but, yeah, okay,
Good.
great.
Our next item on the agenda, is the approval of 2 special licenses. And I'll read them both, then we'll vote for them
I
after
would
the
like to
fact.
know why I don't get invited to any of these parties. You know, here we are
Common theme.
approving all these
Aye.
licenses.
Could be the reason. The first one is on March 8th, March 8th at the Dover Church. And I see the police chief has signed that, great. The second one is on April 26th at Elm Bank. The chief has approved that also. I'll make a motion to approve 2 special licenses as described. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I think I am to second one.
That's pretty good. You just want to get invited.
Try to not get invited.
Yeah.
You're a good sport.
You're awfully quick tonight.
I pride myself in sticking to the time on the agenda. And
Yeah, well, you kind
this
of
one
blew
blew
it.
a little.
I let the record note that I did suggest that perhaps the time allocated was a little light.
It's an important subject matter, and usually our meetings are much quicker, so
But it was,
go a little long.
it was
Doesn't hurt.
very, I really learned a lot, and I had, read through the documentation prior to coming.
Okay, we'll try and make up ground here. Next agenda item is to approve the February 24th, 2014 meeting minutes. This was a very quick meeting,
And like it.
and I had no changes. You had no changes, Carol?
I had a few in there, just some grammatical stuff,
Oh, I didn't see that.
semicolons and,
Okay. Did you tell?
yes, it's in here, yeah, it's in all set.
Oh, thank you. So corrected. So I'll make a motion to accept the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes of February 24th, 2014 as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Tonight, with Mr. Cohen not here, citizens' comments have
Well, we had comments
dramatically
earlier.
gone down.
Right.
That's true. So I will skip, what, do you have
I
a
do
citizens'
have to,
comment?
yes, I do.
Oh, please, Carol.
I do. I just want to remind everybody that we have the town caucus coming up
Monday
on Monday, March 10th.
Thank you.
And
Yes, I'll be there.
the list of open positions are on the homepage of the Dover website. There are a bunch of positions open.
And I know there's a coffee with Selectman Carol has been with the Dover Mothers Association soon, isn't there?
Yes, we have, but I don't have my phone calendar here.
okay.
So sometime, and I think it's the 3rd week of March or something like that. I think it's before I become a grandparent again. I think that's the requirement. So it must be the 3rd week of March. There'll be a coffee at the Dover Mothers Association room at the Carroll Community Center in the morning, and I think there's also a date for an evening thing. But an email has gone out to all those that have part of the Dover Mothers Association. So I look forward to meeting folks and answering any questions you may have.
Maybe we should have a Dover's Grandmothers Association.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Carol.
Well, speaking of that, I took my granddaughter to the official, and Dave and Gary were there, ribbon cutting at the children's room of the library last week, which, if you haven't been down to the new children's room of the library, everybody should go down and take a look. It is absolutely stunning. It's just beautiful.
That's great.
I'll have to stop in.
Thank you. Robin, do you have any comments?
I do not. I think I made more than enough tonight.
That's very good. Then I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much and good night.